The dam on Israel's genocide is beginning to burst. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has labelled Israel, quite correctly, as a genocidal state.
I also point out one thing to you, Mr. Rufiankis, we do not trade with a genocidal state. We do not, Your Honor. And I believe that the other day, from this platform, I explicitly explained precisely what we were talking about when it was said about some things that do not align with the truth.
For some reason, this has had very little coverage in the Western media, presumably because the outlets which have supported and whitewashed Israel's genocide are loath to incriminate themselves. Now, the angry Israeli media, on the other hand, has been covering it, with the Times of Israel reporting that the Israeli foreign minister, the ministry, has summoned Spain's ambassador for what it describes as a dressing down. In a statement, the ministry says, following the severe remarks made by Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish ambassador to Israel has been summoned for a reprimand meeting at the foreign ministry in Jerusalem tomorrow. A reprimand meeting. Imagine committing some of the most heinous crimes of our age in full view of the entire world for 19 months, on top of decades of hideous crimes, and thinking you're the one in the position to be handing out reprimand meetings. Now, Pedro Sanchez is the leader of the Spanish Socialist Party, as well as Prime Minister. He's in coalition with the more left-wing Sumar party. Now, last month, under pressure from Sumar, the Spanish government cancelled a deal to purchase Israeli bullets. They have also joined Norway and Ireland in recognising a Palestinian state, triggering fury from the Israeli state, which accused them of rewarding terrorism. Again, pretty rich from a country which specialises in state terrorism. However, the Spanish government has come under criticism for talking the talk but not walking the walk, with research last month also finding the Spanish state had awarded 46 contracts with more than €1 billion to the Israeli military since the genocide began, breaking their pledge not to engage in the arms trade with Israel. Now, contrary to the Spanish Prime Minister's claims, the Spanish government does trade with the Israeli government. So you might ask, why does this even matter? Surely this is just empty posturing. What matters here is a European government has officially stated for the first time its view that Israel is committing genocide. That piles pressure on other Western governments to cease what is criminal complicity in genocide, because it points ever more to the overwhelming evidence it's genocide and diminishes the excuses that anyone in power can possibly try and produce that they didn't know what was happening. It represents another hole being hacked away from the dam. Let's listen, in that vein, to Tom Fletcher. He's the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, a wordy title, but in other words, he's the UN's top humanitarian official. He spoke at the Security Council of the United Nations, and what he said was utterly devastating.
What more evidence do you need now? Will you act decisively to prevent genocide and to ensure respect for international humanitarian law? Or will you say instead that we did all we could? International aid workers have been the only international civilian presence in Gaza, watching and reporting the unfolding horror. So you have that information. And now the ICJ is considering whether a genocide is taking place in Gaza. It will weigh the testimony that we have shared, but it will be too late. Previous reviews of the UN's conduct in cases of large-scale violations of international human rights and humanitarian law, reports on Myanmar 2019, Sri Lanka 2012, Srebrenica, Rwanda, both in 1999, pointed to our collective failure to speak to the scale of violations while they were committed. This degradation of international law is corrosive and infectious. It is undermining decades of progress on rules to protect civilians from inhumanity and the violent and lawless among us who act with impunity. Humanity, the law, and reason must prevail. This council must prevail. Demand this ends. Stop arming it. Insist on accountability. To the Israeli authorities, stop killing and injuring civilians. Lift this brutal blockade. Let humanitarians save lives. To Hamas and other armed Palestinian groups, release all hostages immediately and unconditionally. Stop putting civilians at risk during military operations. And for those who will not survive what we fear is coming, it will be no consolation to know that future generations will hold us in this chamber to account. But they will. And if we have not seriously done all we could, then we should fear that judgment.
You see, he has the detailed reports of exactly what's happening. He knows the evidence is overwhelming that this is genocide, and it's very clear to him, as it is to anyone who actually understands the scale of the crime being perpetrated by Israel, that history will damn all those who were complicit in this genocide, including those with influence and power who stayed silent, who chose to stay silent. Now, there's also an investigation in the Dutch liberal newspaper NRC, which brings together 7 of the world's leading genocide scholars. All of them conclude that Israel's actions are genocidal. And as Dutch writer Rutger Bregman observes, they state that nearly all of their peers agree with them. That is, there is a consensus amongst genocide scholars. Now, these are Holocaust scholars, heads of major genocide research centers. Their nationalities range from Israeli to American. To quote from the article, can I name someone whose work I respect who does not think this is genocide? No, there is no counter-argument that takes into account all the evidence, says Israeli researcher Raz Sigal. There are certainly still scientists who say it is not genocide, says Unger, but I don't know them. There are, however, scientists who previously rejected the genocide label but have since changed their minds, such as Shmuel Lederman of the Open University of Israel. Let's listen now, in this same vein, to a speech by Logan Rosas, a New York University student, and his graduation speech, which has gone viral.
I've been freaking out a lot about this speech, honestly. And as I search my heart today in addressing you all, my moral and political commitments guide me to say that the only thing that is appropriate to say in this time and to a group this large is a recognition of the atrocities currently happening in Palestine. I want to say that the genocide currently occurring is supported politically and militarily by the United States, is paid for by our tax dollars, and has been live streamed to our phones for the past 18 months, and that I do not wish to speak only to my own politics today, but to speak for all people of conscience, all people who feel the moral injury of this atrocity. And I want to say that I condemn this genocide and complicity in this genocide. Thank you to the class of 2025, and congratulations.
Well, the university has now withdrawn his diploma and is threatening further disciplinary action, once again underlining how it's those who oppose genocide who face persecution, not those who support it. The world turned on its head. This young student has shown more courage and insight than the vast majority of Western journalists and politicians, and that says it all. Now, finally, let's see this heartwarming action of resistance against genocide by Ben Cohen, who is the co-founder of the well-known ice cream company Ben & Jerry's.
Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted while the committee conducts its business. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
Ben, why are you getting arrested?
Move down the hallway. If you stop, you will be arrested.
Poor kids in Gaza by buying bombs and pays for it by kicking kids off Medicaid in the U.S.
Ben, what are you calling for the Congress and senators to do for Gaza?
They need to let food into Gaza. They need to let food to starving kids. Congress is paying to bomb poor kids in Gaza and paying for it by kicking poor kids off Medicaid in the U.S.
How will history judge police officers dragging away those protesting against the mass murder of children? Tough one, isn't it? Now, it should be noted that Ben Cohen is Jewish, and it's not noted enough how many Jewish people across the Western world have been arrested, sacked, deplatformed, threatened for opposing Israel's genocide, all done in the name of protecting Jewish safety. Persecuting Jewish people for opposing genocide in the name of Jewish safety. Again, the world turned on its head. The dam is clearly breaking. A consensus which should have existed so long ago that this is genocide is being forged. And the longer those who resist accepting what this crime really is, the longer they hold out, the more history is going to damn them. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments, help us take on the pro-genocide media and political elite at patreon.com/OwenJoseph4. Listen to this podcast. I'll speak to you in a bit.